Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Tai'Shar Manethrin, a Wheel of Time podcast. I am Will.
I'm Sam.
We're continuing on in the Shadow Rising, and believe we're on, chapter 22?
23.
23. Okay, I was close. We're on chapter 23. We've just run off into the Portal Stone.
Oh, we are. We never did finish 22, actually. We're going to start in the middle of 22, which is okay.
So we're picking up kind of in the middle of 22 because we didn't actually finish 22.
Aviendha finds the Portal Stone and tells Rand he's a jerk. And then Rand isn't sure what symbol to use. You know, there's a bunch of symbols. We were talking about symbols briefly. He doesn't know which one to use, so he's like, let's use Ta'Veren luck. And Mat flips a coin. Rand confirms it by pointing to the same symbol as the one the coin chose without looking at the result of the coin flip. So double Ta'Veren. And then Rand reveals his kind of plan. He pulls a statue of a fat little man that is an angry owl that he found. Egwene asks if he knows what he's doing, and he says, of course I do. Seizes Saidin and uses the Portal Stone. And suddenly they are at Rhuidean. No 6 months lost to this Portal Stone, like what happened in the Great Hunt.
Fortunately.
They are in the waste, looking down on a city covered in fog. Moraine tells Rand he dang near burned himself out. The angry owl really wasn't up to the task. It's kind of like cut his hand, and he was mostly using his own power. And he's like, well, you're right, but here we are. There are two other camps of Aiel kind of nearby. One looks ready to fight, but there's some wise ones present who remind them about the peace of Rhuidean. So everyone seems to take the Portal Stone teleportation trick a little bit in stride. Just, that's the Aiel way, though. They just kind of like, okay, accept that and move on.
Yeah, that is kind of a general thing with them about everything. It's like, just shrug, death comes to everyone, so...
Exactly. I was going to say, like Gaul said, going into the ways, like, the ways? All right, sure. If we gotta die, we're going to die,
Yeah, whatever.
Amis says they were expected because apparently she has the dreaming talent and knew that they were coming.
Right.
An Aiel called Hiron, I don't know how to say that, walks up, who's Ruark's second in command back at Cold Rocks. Lan kind of has a sidebar with Rand's like, yeah, he was there to protect Ruark from the other Aiel camp, though Hiron said he was there to protect the wise ones, just kind of like to help Ruark save face. Lan says he fought the Aiel often before he met Moraine, because of course he did, he's Lan.
Right.
She's surprised and says... And he's like, well, you never asked. And she replies, I will remedy that. Especially now that they are amongst the Aiel.
You can just hear Rosamund Pike, I will remedy that.
Very true. An Aiel from the other camp is there, a redhead named Couladin. Dude immediately embodies just about every negative stereotype of a redhead. You can have a ginger, you can... be possibly think of by being just a rude jerk.
For some reason, I picture Couladin. This is totally just my headcanon. Like, he's got the red hair, but I picture like having really dark eyebrows and like deep circles under his eyes, like a wild look in his eyes. I don't know why, but for some reason, that's the picture I have of him.
And he opens by being a rude jerk to a wise woman who is described as being grandmotherly by Bear. So it's like, all right, you're going to be rude to a grandma dude. Not
right.
Cool. So Rand asks the wise ones for the right to enter Rhuidean. Couladin doesn't like that, but then Couladin doesn't care for most things. Rand explains that his mother was Aiel, and Amis corrects him. Not his mother, his father. Of course, All four wise ones give their consent for him to go. Mat asks the same thing to the surprise of everyone. Couladin responds to this by trying to stab him. And Amis and Melaine wrap Couladin up with the power. But the wise ones tell Mat he can't go because it isn't permitted for a wetlander to go into Rhuidean. Rand's like, he can come if he wants. So they're like, okay, we're not going to stop you. But the wise ones tell them they can't take weapons. Rand pulls his belt knife, puts the angry ale down, and says, that's the best I can do. But what I really want here is for him to hold up his hands and strike a karate pose. These hands are registered weapons in 3 states,
Then you have a moment right after this that I really dearly am looking forward to actually coming to fruition in the TV show, and that's Mat taking all of the knives he has off of his person.
Yes!
from up his sleeves and down his back and in his boots, and it just keep on. I just see like it. I mean, it's a classic scene. You've seen it a lot of times, but just the whole thing of like more and more knives till there's like a pile,
a giant pile of knives. Yes,
of knives. They're like, "Is that all?" And he's like, "Oh wait," and he's like, "Yeah,
exactly." I thought the same thing. Can't wait to see that. I hope we get this far for that reason alone.
Yeah.
The wise ones tell them they can't carry food, water, or weapons into Rodion, which is sort of a big deal because it's really hot. I mean, Lan at one point hands Egwene a water skin's like, hey, drink up because it's so hot. They're just like getting dehydrated standing there. They tell Rand he must go into the center. And Lan has a cool nickname, of course. I think you mentioned Line means the last of the Malkieri that they refer to him as an aside. Bear tells Aviendha she has to become a wise one. Moraine says she could be a great Aes Sedai if trained properly. The wise one's like, nah, we'll train her. Then they make her get rid of her weapons and strip down because, of course.
This I brought up earlier.
Right.
This is frustrating to me.
It really is. Yeah.
Because Matt and Rand
just
went into Rodion and they were allowed to wear clothes.
What the heck?
Now we have Aviendha going in, and in a second we're going to have Moraine, and the two of them don't get to wear clothes.
Right.
Why?
We need one of two things happen. Either everyone wears clothes or nobody wears clothes.
Yes.
I'd rather everyone wear clothes.
Yes. Most of the time that is a better situation. I don't feel like there was a good reason for that. That's one of the few places where I actually do just look and go, seriously, Jordan?
Come on, man.
Come on, get woke, bro.
Moraine asks about Gaishain and gets a little lesson in Aiel culture about Jiito, their honor shame culture. The Gaishain, of course, serve a year and a day without taking a weapon for their honor's sake. And we'll get a lot more about Gaishain later, so I don't feel like we have to get into it too much here.
Sure.
Amy's let slip that Moraine has to go through the rings of Rodion as well, which of course leads to an exchange about what the wise ones know about their future, and she wasn't supposed to tell Moraine about that. In their visions, Moraine demanded to go, and they refused to tell her the consequences of what would happen if she doesn't go. So she strips down, jogs down the burning sand after Aviendha. It says, please prevent Lan from following her, otherwise he's going to get himself killed. Egwene asks them to teach her about dreaming. They tell her, for starters, no Teleron Riad without supervision, which Egwene more or less immediately ignores.
Right.
On to chapter 24. Matt and Rand head into Rodion. They stand at the edge of the fog wall, which is surrounded by a blazing hot desert, which is a crazy picture.
Yeah.
Rand says, you can go back if you want. And Matt gives a fun answer. He's like, well, maybe the snake people say that everyone has to go to Rodion. Like, oh, yeah. Of course, they didn't tell Rand to go there. At least he didn't know if they did. But they did tell Matt to go. So Rand walks right into the fog, and Matt follows him. And for a moment, he can't see anything and steps into an open area with no sunlight, domed over and surrounded on all sides by fog, which is going to be just a cool scene, when they're seeing the city. And it opens up into the city, which is huge, kind of palaces made of marble and crystal and cut glass, gleaming columns. But it's unfinished.
Yeah.
And completely empty. Matt walks to a fountain that's dry and just completely parched. And Rand channels and causes water to gush out of it. And then they drink their fill, start walking toward the center of the city. So what's the Matt thinking about? The treasure that could be inside the buildings. Dude, did you learn nothing from Shadar Logoth? Of course he could have forgotten, I guess. Thanks to
it's true.
But it's just kind of like, come on, man.
It's like the Cave of Wonders situation in Aladdin. Do not touch the treasure!
Right. Dang it, Apu. So the street opens to a plaza with a tree and a concentric rings of glass columns. Rand walks toward the columns, but stops at the tree, which is a Vendasora, Tree of Life. Mm-hmm. And they kind of have this back and forth about the Tree of Life. And Matt says, you got to stay outside because you'll go mad if you go through the rings. Because basically, either you go through the rings and come out a clan chief, or you don't come out at all.
Right.
So Rand's like, I'm going to go in there. You just stay out here and hang out for a while. So Rand walks in, disappears. So Matt's got some time on his hands, and so naturally he gets in trouble. He kind of walks around and notices there's a bunch of artifacts in the center of the square, and one of them is another twisted stone doorway. So he's still kind of mad at the snake people, and decides it'll be a good idea to go back in there and interrogate some snake people. So he goes in and immediately realizes he's not in the same place. This one has it's a star-shaped chamber with columns. There's a thick layer of dust on the floor because no one's been here in a while.
Right.
Then there's another dude in front of him who says, "A very long time." Sounds, kind of like snake people. But it will be interesting. I was thinking about it. It'll be interesting to see what direction the show goes with the Eilfin and the Eelfin. The fox people are described as fox-like, but it's not exactly like having a fox head on top of a human body. It's kind of the description is interesting. His eyes were too big and almost colorless, set deep in a narrow-jawed face. His short-cut, palely reddish hair stood up like a brush, and his ears, lying flat against his head, had a hint of a point at the top. So, you can certainly see how the fox-like features, but not really like a fox. So
Also, I appreciate just mentioning to anybody who might be reading through this for the first time that these are the Eelfin. The other ones were called the Eilfin. We don't get those names until way later in the series, and it doesn't hurt to know what they are called.
Right. Yeah, it's mentioned. It's mentioned by Birgitta, but we don't realize. But it's not here. Right. They don't identify themselves.
Right. Yeah, and even when she mentions it, it's not totally clear what she's referring to. So
that's a good point.
It's not until much later that the whole all of that comes together with Eelfin, Eilfin, Snakes and Foxes, Tower of Genji, all that stuff. And it was one of those things where I appreciated having the Wikia so I could follow along with it, because otherwise
absolutely.
it was a little confusing.
So the fox person grins at Matt and tells him he can give him what he came for. Matt's kind of uncomfortable, but he really doesn't see a way out and does want more answers, so he follows. Doesn't have much common sense, our Matt, sometimes.
Yep.
He says, "I'll have your hide for a saddlecloth if you cheat me." Then realizes the fox man has leather straps made from human skin across his chest.
Yeah.
Which is like, that probably should have been a bit of a red flag, I would think.
Right. I think Matt is colorblind to red flags. I really...
Yes.
I think he just can't see red at all.
None at all. So the guide leads Matt into a room similar to the one with the snake people, but there are foxes on these, as you would think. Matt asks his 3 questions and is greeted with silence because they don't answer questions. So he kind of starts yelling and railing at them and says, "I want these holding my memories filled." And one of them says... Exactly. So he asks for a way to be free of Aes Sedai power and a way home. They say done to these as well. Then they call him a fool and say he never agreed on a price, though he was wise to ask for a way home. So then darkness closes around him and he can't breathe. Back to Rand. So that was like, whoa, what happened there? But we don't know yet. But then we get to some really cool flashbacks. I mean, these are some of the best flashbacks in the series, honestly.
Yeah, so this is my favorite chapter in this book for sure. And I will say, it was not on my first reading. So if by chance you're reading through this for the first time and you're like, I couldn't follow this.
Right, it is kind of jarring at first. Like, what the heck is going on? Who are these people? What's going on?
Right, and you don't have any context. I mean, like... I don't even know if we've heard the word the boar.
I don't know if we have either. I'm not sure.
All of those kinds of phrasings and everything in relationship to the Age of Legends and what happened with why the boar happened and everything. All of that stuff doesn't. Right. And so it really, you almost have to come back to this after reading the whole series to fully appreciate.
Absolutely. On a reread, it is so much more interesting because you're like, I understand what's happening. The flashbacks go backwards in time, showing Rand the history of the Aiel, essentially.
Right.
So he starts out as Mandine, clan chief at Rhuidean, and he's talking to the Jin Aiel, and it's like, well, first off, who are the Jin Aiel? So it's like we immediately have questions if you don't know what's going on.
Right.
And they tell him and the other clan chiefs that anyone who wants to be a clan chief must come to Rhuidean and learn where the Aiel came from. And there's an Aes Sedai there. And it's like, wait, why is there an Aes Sedai in the Waste? But she tells them about the prophecies of the dragon and says that he who comes with the dawn will tie the Aiel together and destroy them. And they agree. Mandine, who's the perspective, agrees to their requirements. It's as Rand is walking through here, he takes a step and he has another flashback. He sees Muradin, who is Couladin's brother, also trying to walk and not having a good time at all.
Yeah.
Presumably, he's just not okay with what he's learning.
Muradin is trying to rip his eyeballs out by the end of it, I believe, is what's described, which, once again, that's not very PG. So
True. That is true. Then he's Roderick, who's a 20-year-old Aiel who is but he's not in the Waste, which is kind of jarring. And he's talking to this man who lives in a nearby town and tells this guy that the Aiel guard the Jinn Aiel, and they have like a dozen or so Aes Sedai with them, headed for the spine of the world, presumably headed for the Waste, but not there yet. And so another step, and Rand is Jordan, who is an Aiel, who's talking to some of the Jinn Aiel, and one of those, the Jinn, says, "We are the true Aiel, and you have given up the way," which is sort of our first clue what's happened here. And Jordan, the Aiel, says, "That's not true. I've never held a sword," which is, another clue.
Right.
Some of the Jinn kids have been kidnapped, and Jordan promises they'll bring him back. A couple of the Jinn Aiel, a man and a woman, pick up spears and join them, which saying they forsake the Jinn. But the woman is the first woman to do so, and so becomes the first Fardire Asmai. She mentions that her husband cares more for trees than for her now, talking about the saplings of the Tree of Life. Picks up a spear and says, "This is my husband now." The first, first Fardire.
The maiden of the
wedded
spear.
to the spear, yes.
Yeah.
Rand takes another step, and he is the character's father, Jordan's father, Lewin. And this is what happens repeatedly, like kind of goes back to generations. And Lewin is sneaking up to a camp where his sister is being held captive. Man comes at him with a knife, and Lewin brains him over the head with an iron kettle, killing him. So Lewin's friend starts to pick up a sword, but Lewin says a sword is a weapon made to kill, and that's it. A spear, on the other hand, can be used for hunting. So his rationale is that picking up a spear doesn't violate the way of the leaf. Of course, his people don't see it that way. Kick him out. But he claims he is still Aiel. And this is it's like every one of these, we're getting another kind of tidbit about how the Aiel came to be who they are and who they were.
Right. And this is really where it's fully revealed that at one time all the Aiel followed the way of the leaf, the way that the Tinkers do.
Right.
So it's also, someone implied that the Tinkers are related to
and we
the
get
Aiel.
That. Right, we get that in the very next flashback in the beginning of chapter 26. And he's Aiden, who is, I believe, Lewin's father, maybe, and clutching his dead son's children. And then another man called Solwyn tells him that the Aiel we're going to stop doing what we're doing. We're going to go try to find the songs that we lost. They're still keeping the way of the leaf. Aiden says they betrayed what it means to be Aiel. And so, of course, Solwyn and those that leave with him are the first Tuatha'an, the first Tinkers. And Rand is standing next to Muradin now, whose mouth is he's just screaming a howl, but he can't make any noise. So, of course, that is what Muradin is experiencing, and Muradin is just can't handle it. He can't handle the idea that the Aiel and the Tuatha'an came from the same people.
Yep.
Then he becomes Jonai, who is Aiden's father. And again, just going further back in time, the Aiel meet with some Ogier who have lost the steading and have begun to feel the longing, and they're just wandering. Then Jonai dies of a heart attack. But Aiden, of course, is too young to know everything that his father knew. So it's like you can see how part of what it meant to be Aiel was lost when this character died and just didn't have a chance to pass on all of his knowledge to his son. And then we take another step, and he's Jonai again, but in a city called Perrin, which has been destroyed. This is right after the breaking of the world. So this is I just can't wait to see these flashbacks. This would be so cool.
This one and the next one or two.
Exactly. The next two are just like the coolest. Because we actually get to see what the Age of Legends were like firsthand.
Right.
And then the immediate aftermath. So Jonai enters the Hall of the Servants, which we've heard that before, what the Hall of the Servants is, and finds 6 female Aes Sedai. They're standing there around a table that has Kalendor driven through the banner of the dragon, which is quite an image. They're arguing about prophecy, what it means, And Someshta, the Green Man, is there, but he's in pretty rough shape at this point. He doesn't remember Jonai, even though they were friends. And we get the idea that there are others like him. Jonai thinks of him as one of the Nim. Solinda Sedai, who's one of the Aes Sedai standing there, tells Jonai about what happened to the Aiel at a city called Zora. T with a T. A male Aes Sedai who had gone mad named Jarek Mondoran slaughtered all these Aiel, they just kind of stood there like kind of arm in arm singing to him, and he just kind of killed them one by one. They were in a group, and then he just glassed the whole city because he was crazy.
Yep.
And she's like, we don't want that to happen to all of you, so just get out of here. So she sends Jonai out, and this sort of starts the Aiel wandering with like the Tir-Angrial, the Angrial, all the cuttings from the Tree of Life, and it's like, protect what you can, get out of here. And this is when Muradin is clawing his eyes out, literally.
Yep.
And Rand takes a step past him and is Kuman, Aiden's father. And this occurs before and during the breaking, before. So this is some crazy imagery. There are soldiers here that have shock lances sitting atop armored Joe cars, and it's like we get just a hint of details, but it's like, man, I want to know more about what the heck.
Right. Well, it's kind of interesting, and because it's told from the perspective of a person for whom all of this is normal, right. We don't really get a clear description of any of this stuff. So it's not like someone who saw hoverflies and show wings every day would stop and say hoverflies, which looked like this, and show wings that look like this. So that kind of makes sense, but it also is kind of fun because it allows you to just imagine what all of these things were like. And I picture a lot of detail, a lot of color in this world, and that it's, very dense, and just the skies are full of these different things flying around. Yeah, exactly. And we get another detail that's really interesting here, that there was a time when soldiers weren't needed because there were no shadow spawn. And so like the fact that there are soldiers is a little surprising to him still. But the fact that there was, like, during the Age of Legends, before the Boar, before the breaking of the world, before all of these things, there was this time of just kind of tranquility where, no wonder all these technologies flourished, because there wasn't the Dark One wasn't free. It was fully sealed. It's like, and you assume it was probably better sealed than than what Lews Therin did. Right. It's definitely the feeling you get. Someshta walks up, the Green Man, though there are other Nim alive at this point. This is, Someshta is the same one that we've been dealing with. Right. And the Aiel and the Ogier are singing as Someshta dances, and a field they're standing in grows plants. I would figure this is probably the future site of a steading, would be my guess. Okay. I don't know that for sure. It's not really said outright, but it seems like it would make sense to me. And they say that, like, the Blight can't come here, and that, like, anyway, it's different things that make it sound permanent. A soldier then tells them that Lews Therin led a strike against Sheol Gol and sealed the Boar, though something is disrupting communications. So we know what that means is that, the Dark One tainted the One Power for the male half. And, of course, disrupting communications is like, hold on, what are communications? Right. There's all these details here that... They have walkie-talkies? Right, something, yeah. Did the cell towers go down? What's up? Right. And then a townsperson punches him in the face and says that they're coming for anyone who served Lanfear secretly. They had hung one of his friends, Charn. So it seems like hatred for the Aiel and the Tuatha is not a new thing. It certainly was the case in this point. And then Rand takes another step and is Charn, the one who was hung. And this is the furthest we go back. And this is the crazy, this is like way before the breaking of the world. And this is when, sort of the height of the Age of Legends. He's staring at this thing called the Sharon, which is a giant white sphere of energy, like a sun 1,000 feet wide, just floating in the air. And an Aes Sedai named Nieren had told him that she found a new source for the One Power that both male and females could tap. Then the Sharon broke apart, fell out of the sky, shooting black flames everywhere. So I'm guessing old Nieren actually discovered the Dark One, and the power she found was the true power. Right.
And her Sharome thingy is probably what caused the boar.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's great job, Mira, and you kind of messed everything up for everybody.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of biblical imagery here in one way, not imagery necessarily, but analogs.
Yeah.
Kind of the taking of the fruit and
Sure.
also like Tower of Babel kind of.
Oh,
this,
yeah, sure. That's fair.
this whole, like trying to, reach up beyond what you can grasp and being toppled as a result of it.
Most definitely. We can safely assume that this, this beautiful, like, domed palace that, where Charn was, becomes the blight, essentially. Like,
right.
The city.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, and of course, later on when they're in Sheol and all that, it's like this was once a beautiful city of scholarship and power and the height of civilization, and
for sure.
Now it's the center of the blight.
So Rand steps out of the glass columns. No sign of Muradin. It's safe to say he's dead. He's going to die. He's already clawed his eyes out, for crying out loud. But he's in time to see Matt being hung. So he makes a Sidene sword, cuts him down, and kind of does CPR, pounds on his chest until Matt wakes up.
And let me just say, Matt died and is alive again.
Yep.
That was not clear to me on my first reading, that was Matt dying and coming back.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's super clear. I mean, his heart stops beating, but it isn't like, it's just kind of like, well, he woke up, It's kind of the way it's portrayed, yeah.
And that becomes important much, much, much later on.
It does, yeah. It's not portrayed here as being important at all. Yeah, it's just like, it's like Rand saved him, really, is how it's portrayed.
And the only indication that there is any significance to his being hung is the fact that he has that scar, and he continually hides it whenever he can, just as a reminder that it happened. But other than that, you don't really have much indication that this was a significant event.
Right.
Other than, wow, it's a good thing Rand was there to save him.
Yeah, and he's very grateful. Oh, wait, no, he isn't. He says, that's what I get for staying around you. You always get me in trouble. Of course, they don't have much time to argue because sand people start attacking them and not the... Exactly. He's like, these are creatures made out of sand, but Rand sends a whirlwind and knocks them apart.
Sure.
Then they run out of the city, and Matt notices it's almost morning, so Rand is fulfilling prophecy. He will come from Roidion at dawn and tie you together with bonds you cannot break. So back to the taming of the Perrin. He's in the ways with Gaul, Loyal, Fail, and Co. They make it to the Manetheren Gate, and sudden Shrollic attacked in the ways. Myrddraal shows up, and Perrin breaks its face with his hammer. Almost loses himself to the inner wolf. They get out of the Waygate, and just a second before Machin Shin gets to them, bulging out of the Waygate in a really terrifying fashion. Sort of importantly, Loyal closes the Waygate, but puts the Avendasor leaf back. He's like, I don't want to destroy Waygate. Maybe they could be cleansed someday. And then chapter 28 is to the Tower of Genjai, which is... It seems like it's going to be like, I'm like, oh, this is awesome, but then it's not what you think it is, unfortunately. Or at least on the reread. Perrin and company are outside the Waygate. Perrin decides to enter the Wolf Dream and sort of scout around is his idea. See some visions of Rand, Matt, and Egwene, through windows. Which is kind of interesting. Yeah. But Hopper's nowhere to be found, so he just kind of starts exploring on his own without him. Teleporting from the top of one mountain to the next. And, it reminds me a little of Elder Scrolls Morrowind and how you could get your jump up really high. You could jump from one mountain to the next.
I only ever watched you and Ryan play that. I never played it myself, but I remember watching one of you guys continually jumping so that you could get your jump
exactly
really high.
It's really absurd until you get it to that point. It's like, oh, this is awesome. It was worth all the
I was
jumping.
just watching it. What am I doing with my life? I'm watching my friend just jump.
Exactly, yeah. Perrin sees another man standing on top of a hill, and then he's gone. But he's left the half-skin pelt of a wolf behind. Perrin chases him through, several across the landscape to a tower of metal. And then Hopper shows up and tells him that he is chasing a man called Slayer, and that in the Wolf Dream, who is in the Wolf Dream in the flesh. And Hopper says the tower is evil, and that Slayer can kill in the Wolf Dream, in which case a wolf will die forever. And then randomly Birgitta shows up to warn him against going in there. Yeah.
I really hope that they randomly just play some Slayer when
right.
when they. I would be against it anywhere else.
Just here, yep.
Just here. Everywhere else, it better be like a traditional kind of score.
Right.
But or
it could be like a high fantasy version of a Slayer song.
Right.
Like Ed Sheeran showing up in Game of Thrones and plugging his latest Spotify single.
Why not?
Because that happened,
Yes, that did.
Anyway,
Let's everybody remember that for a second.
And Birgitta says the Tower of Genji is a doorway to the realm of the Eelfin and the Aelfin, snakes and the foxes. And she talks about the kids' board game that they all played that is impossible to win unless you break the rules.
Right. And like I said, on the second reread, it feels like, I should have known that was...
You wouldn't, of course, connect it, if you hadn't, if it wasn't.
Right.
Because,
But that's part of the reason why I just go ahead and say, if you're reading this for the first time, that's the creatures that Matt visited in the two different twisted doorways.
She says one other thing that's worth mentioning, that they're not evil like the Shadow, but yet they're so different from humankind that they might as well be.
Right.
Which is good. And then Gato Kane shows up, and then they're both gone. She's kind of like, you're not supposed to be here, get out of here. And then the whole time Hopper is just kind of lying there with his paws on his hands, with his head on his paws. I actually wrote with his paws on his hands. Anyway.
Oh, well.
And then Perrin responds with, "It's a wonder you aren't attacked by chipmunks," which I like. But he doesn't seem to be able to see or hear Birgitta or Gaito Kane. Perrin bids Hopper goodbye, and Hopper responds with a wonderful line, "May you know good hunting, young bull, and cheese to give you many cubs." I love it.
Very young, much bull.
So Perrin goes to the Althor farm, finds it burned to the ground. Tam, of course, is nowhere to be found, luckily. They continue on to Emmons Field, and Perrin goes to the Wine Spring Inn to look for Master Alvier, who he does find. And Master and Mistress Alvier they're just trying to get Perrin to leave because the White Cloak, they know the White Cloaks are looking for him and that they're in town or nearby. And he refuses and tells them the reason he's there, to give himself up for killing White Cloaks so that they'll kind of leave the town alone. But then they tell him the truth that Trollocs killed his whole family, and the White Cloaks have been providing some semblance of protection. Yeah, at least they think that Trollocs killed his family.
They think so that...
We will find out the truth later. Tam and Abel are okay, as are Matt's family, luckily. It's just all of Perrin's family. And I was wondering about this. Did we ever actually meet Perrin's family?
Nope. Nope. I see people all the time comment that this is like a really emotional moment when they get it on the reread. I feel for Perrin, but
right.
I don't have like a big emotional response here because we didn't meet these people and there was no real connection.
Yeah, it seems like an obvious place where the show can at least introduce them, have them come to Beltane or something and, just put a face to a name, have some extras that at least have one or two lines perhaps even, and then we'll have a little bit more of an emotional impact when the scene comes up.
Go ahead and mount that pistol on the wall, Chekhov.
There we go. Yeah, exactly. They also mentioned Lord Luke, who is a hunter for the Horn, kind of been in town, kind of offering to help coordinate the defenses. First mentioned we give him. And then Perrin just kind of weeps for his family in Fael's arms. Decides he can't give himself up to the White Cloaks, not yet. So this is our chapter 30, our final chapter, I believe. Perrin decides, got to free Master Luhan at least, and Matt's family. He's not going to leave them in captivity. They decide they're going to go find Tam and Abel in the Westwood, and Mistress Alvier is going to take them there. Sin Bui sees Loyal and mistakes him for a Trolloc. And Marin Alvier sets him straight, leaves him thoroughly cowed. And then she leads him out of town on a wooded path that's kind of all but abandoned. And they run into warders, Tomas
and Ivan.
Yep.
Yeah, they see the color-shifting cloaks, and they're like, "Warders, you have Aes Sedai here. Why have you been holding out?" And they've been saying the whole time, this is women's circle business.
Right, exactly. And that brings us to chapter 30, which is the halfway point of our of our book, I would say. So.
Yes. So we'll pause here for now and catch up with you next week. As always, I want to remind you that we would love to hear from you. You can email us, either Will or Sam, at tsmpodcast.com, or just stuff at tsmpodcast.com. If you have any complaints or questions or suggestions, regardless, we'd love to hear from you.
Definitely.
You can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter, Podcast TSM for those, as well as find us on Facebook. We love hearing from folks, and if you say something that we can say with our mothers listening, then we'll say it
Very good.
on the podcast and give you a shout out. So thanks for listening, and until next time, Tai'Shar Manethrin.